myself, I'm Richard Cunningham, I'm the Development Director for SIL. I'll explain what that means in a bit. The inner child in me says, I've got to first of all say good afternoon, Wimpole Street. That's largely just a result of being a heavy metal fan when I was younger, really, but I've got it out of the way now, so it's done. Quite a lot to get through. I wanted to start possibly slightly contentiously by saying that about a year ago I came to a conference, not dissimilar from this one, to listen to a major provider talk about supported living. And if I'm honest, I was very disappointed, because what I was looking for was hopefully a discussion or a seminar on the importance and the possibilities of supported living for helping people with mental health problems recover, and for smoothing pathways back into the community from out-of-area placements, from locks and rehabs and all the rest of it and so on. And above all, for helping people develop the skills that they'll need to maintain their independence in the community. What I got, unfortunately, was a bit of an advert, really, an infomercial for the company's services, and it was disappointing. Today, I'm hoping that we can present something about how supported living, how we believe it can really benefit, particularly individuals with complex mental health issues, people with difficult histories, risky behaviour, etc., and particularly how that can be done when you're working in partnerships. I know it doesn't happen very often. That said, as you'll tell from the outside, the massive logo we've got there compared to our partners in Northampton Healthcare, this is obviously, the message has to be delivered with a huge amount of hard sell really as well. So, settle in. There's a lot of selling going on. I wanted to start though with just a quick piece from a lady we supported in one of our services in Northampton. Hopefully the video will work. It's been a bit of a rocky ride so far. Here we are. This is Kay.
My journey when I first come on well is when, I suppose, when my daughter died in 2002. She died of preeclampsia, and even though that I cried and we had the funeral and stuff, I never really got over it. I kind of blamed myself for her death. I then kind of every time I got depressed or was thinking about her, I would be drinking. I then started cutting to focus on the pain and not reality of how I was really feeling. I then started hearing voices, and it was really scary because I didn't know what was happening. It got to a stage where my husband couldn't live with me, couldn't cope with me, so he had me put into hospital in Cornwall, Fletcher Ward. I was there for some time. I must have been really poorly because I can't even remember the first 2 years. Through my pathway in St Andrews, I was on medium secure, and as I was getting better, then I went on to low secure, and then we had quite a few meetings, and they decided for me, rather than go home with 4 kids straight away, is to do it slowly.
That's part of a longer piece, and we'll hear more from Kay, hopefully if we've got time a bit later on. But I'm pleased to say in the meantime that Kay is back with her family. While she was with us, she learned to drive, so she now drives her kids to school. She lives in Northampton. She volunteers at Mind, and actually it's interesting enough, one of our managers knew her when she was at St Andrews, and it's just incredible where she's come from really in terms of, the history was, sort of self-harming, multiple suicide attempts, a lot of aggression and violence and so on, and she said 8 years in hospital, I think, in total. So that I shall segue into video content, not that. What was interesting about Kay is Kay says that had the right kind of accommodation being available, she felt she could have possibly come out sooner than that 8 years. And I think with a certain degree of poetic license that tallies rather nicely with the kind of CRIC report from 2016 that talks about, on the back of the 39% reduction in beds, 90% of wards operating at over 85 occupancy, and possibly 1 in 6 people who could have been cared for somewhere else. I think that sort of tallies kind of interestingly with that in terms of what Kay said, really, in that if there was appropriate step down, people could be moved on and could be back in the community, rediscovering themselves faster. And interesting enough, I mean, the report concluded that the bed crisis was very significantly a problem of discharges and alternatives to admission, or a lack of alternatives to admission. Again, interesting, we'll segue into this. This is what Martin and I, my MD, cooked up in his kitchen about 5 years ago when we started doing what we're doing now. And this is basically our mission statement, that we believe too many people are currently residing in hospital secure and other institutional settings who, with the right support and structure, would thrive in a community setting. And that's the kind of message that I particularly want to drive home this afternoon. Moving on. So who are we? So here's a kind of pen picture of who we are. So we're part of the Lifeways group of companies. So we're a private company. Very often in literature, that is others, as in NHS, voluntary organisation, and others, whoever they may be. Our aim is to transition individuals from hospital, medium, low secure settings back into the community. Also very much as an alternative to residential care, which is a kind of half-life, half-lived in many cases. High support, recovery focus, and an enabling model for complex clients. However, just in case anybody out there isn't quite convinced, recovery is not an excuse for doing nothing. How we deliver it is through a partnership with developers, so developing bespoke accommodation for individuals. Individuals have their own tenancy through specialist landlords that we work with. These are landlords who understand us, our client group, and how we work together to provide the structure that enables people to remain safe in the community. In the community, close to home, absolutely. Bang in the community, absolutely. All our services are right at the heart of their communities because that's where people should be, interacting, developing social capital, back closer to home, close to their relatives and friends, and close to opportunities that we all enjoy, to go to the cinema, to go to the pub, if appropriate, and to get education, training, work, all the rest of it, not in some enclosed facility surrounded by sort of high wire fences in the community, supposedly passing off as independent living. Our innovation, well, I'll talk a bit about our recovery model, because that's a bit different. Quality and practice team. We're not saying we're unique, there are other models around. What we don't have necessarily is a reliance on medical trained staff working in our services. We started off doing that years ago with an RMN in every service, and what we looked at then was actually, we saw the RMNs being de-skilled and the staff team being de-skilled. And actually, we're firm believers that with the right training and support, our staff team can really deliver the outcomes and support people to achieve their goals. So we have a quality and practice team, previously known as a clinical team, but that proved too confusing. And they provide wraparound support to our services, particularly to the staff team, ensuring that they have the skills and competence to understand what they're working with and to work through issues with the individuals they're supporting. And there are three key functions that ensure we're competent to manage that complexity and risk in the community. And currently, we're at 23 operational schemes supporting 333 tenancies across the country. So we were influenced by making recovery a reality, obviously. Key for us is that concept of hope. I used to work in homelessness circles for years, and predominantly with sort of drug and alcohol users, and regardless of what Nancy Reagan said, just say no doesn't always really work. And actually, particularly when working with heroin users, which was my experience, is actually to get someone to give up something that one person once described as his best friend is very much about an economic transition. Is there something worthwhile at the end of it? So that idea of hope for us begins with our accommodation offer, which basically for me hopefully lays down a red line in the sand saying, actually, this could be you. And in the words of L'Oreal, you're worth it. Let's see if we can make it happen. Self-management and the helping relationship, a bit more about that in a minute or two. Identity and the social context. I'm a huge believer in identity, really. Goffman talked about asylums and the stripping away of identity and turning people into harmless or passive recipients. And it is interesting. I mean, this is one of the things we have to try and help people do, is how to build that identity. I used to ask support workers what the second question at a dinner party would be, and generally was met with kind of disbelief because, obviously, people don't go to dinner parties that often, really. But just, I'm going to focus on the audience here. So the first question would be, any answers? Who are you? And the second question would be, absolutely. So how do we help our people we support answer that question? And that's crucial, isn't it? Changing that self-identity, becoming someone in the community, someone who does, and I hate to use the analogy of the pub again, which displays my drinking problem, but someone who's down the pub and who is primarily the member of the darts team and also happens to have a mental health problem. And that's more complex for people with complex mental health. and I think we need to remember that. So no health without mental health. Got to check the time here. Absolutely, more people develop mental health problems, greater ability to manage their own lives. Key thing, skills to actually be able to self-manage. A positive experience of care and support, and above all, for me, control over their lives in the least restrictive environment. And our recovery model. Douglas Adams wrote about the dark tea time of the soul, and his character was the immortal alien, woebagger, the infinitely prolonged, who basically could have made it had it not been Sunday afternoons, and that propelled him on his mission to insult the universe in alphabetical order, and he gritted his teeth. For me, when do I need support? I need support probably around about 7 o'clock most evenings actually, when I'm reaching for the wine bottle. Thankfully, I have a skilled and competent family around me to look for those issues and those risks, and to point out that it's actually 5 o'clock rather than 7 o'clock, and to remind me that didn't you say you were going to knock it on the head for a bit? So yeah, what we've moved away from is an hourly based support model. The idea is actually that to our minds that's too prescriptive, and very often the support isn't delivered. I mean, I know of one case, the sister organisation, where support workers sat for 6 hours in someone's living room whilst they locked the door to their bedroom and refused support. Basically people we're looking to support people when they need that support. To be able to sort of support those moments, those dark tea times of the soul, to be able to understand people's lives and create an environment where they can learn skills. So a competent workforce that's able to wrap around individuals, to coach people, to provide the guidance and the help and support at the right time, to be able to monitor their behaviours and to see whether they're functioning well, whether there's signs of deterioration, and know how to respond, to be able to implement risk management plans, and to be able to communicate with other professionals in a coherent way. So support that flexes when the individual needs it, and above all is on tap, not on top. So it's a coaching model. And again, the analogy I always use is my daughter going down for the first time to the newsagents, walking her down the road to show her how to do it, how to cross the road. The second time I'm standing anxiously in my slippers at the front door. The third time I'm sitting anxiously on the sofa. The reality is a crap analogy. She goes to school now and I'm still anxious about her crossing the road, but the principle is there. The idea is that we're supporting people to learn things, but we're not doing them for them. So we're there when things aren't great, but we're letting people move along and find their own skills. I'm going to hand over to my MD, Martin, now. I'll take over, thank you. I'll be back in a minute.
Thank you, Richard. If you look in your armrest beside you, there's a small black box. I think you'll find that is to interpret my accent, so you may need it. Okay, that's the only joke I do, by the way, so no more after this. Is that the right way? Yeah. Our vision for this company started probably about 6 or 7 years ago, when both Richard and myself were working for another organisation. We were providing independent hospitals within the private sector. And I hadn't done that before. My background was social work and statutory services. And when I came into that adult services, I had this kind of strange experience where I would go into those hospitals and there would be a few people around you in the day, and you would ask where people were, and I would learn that they were out, they were volunteering, they were out doing their activities, whatever it was, doing it themselves. And then they would come back in at the end of the day and somebody would lock the door behind them, and they would stay there overnight and would go through the same routine the next day. And I couldn't quite comprehend initially what was going on. Why did people need to be in a locked environment at night time, but actually had this sort of freedom during the day to go out and do things? That wasn't everybody, but there was a good cohort across the business. And that was my kind of first experience of trying to understand and learn what recovery was about and what was happening in the service. And essentially, for me, there's a lot about risk in terms of what we do and how we move those people from hospital out. And it's that idea of risk which was actually maintaining and holding people in hospital. And we tried to understand that and unpick it as we were delivering the business and look at what the different blocks were and the different barriers were. One of the key ones has been not just the lack of alternative in the community, but a lack of understanding about what we can do in the community if we move people on from hospital. And that's been a big part of our business model. If we're going to be successful, somehow we need to form relationships with partners so together we can help everybody understand what can be achieved. And we realised early on we couldn't do it ourselves. There's also a kind of a dilemma, I suppose, that when people move on from hospital into what we would normally or traditionally refer to as supported living, it's generally seen as being the domain of local authority and not the NHS. And therefore that idea of complexity and risk changes, and how people see and perceive risk changes quite considerably with it as well. The funding model changes, the expectation of how we're going to engage with somebody changes. And we find, and my experience has been, that many people remain in hospital because we can't bridge that gap between what happens in hospital and what's going on in the community. So again, from our perspective, we were very clear that we needed to form those partnerships which help us bridge from NHS to local authority, and somehow we sit within that circle that enable us to understand and share risk and share experience. Where have we got to with the business? Well, we started in earnest probably the summer of 2015. As Richard says, we now have about 330 odd tenancies across the country. They're not all occupied. This has been a kind of growth for ourselves. But over that sort of 5-6 year period, we've offered services in excess of 260 people now across there. We have about 180, 190 people currently within the services, and we're a business which is on that sort of growth cycle. And of that cohort that comes to us, and it's intentional, we have intentionally looked for the more complex people in the system. Where are people not coming out? And we've seen about 28% of people are coming to us with what we would define as a high-risk index offence: arson, murder, sex offences. Individuals who historically have not moved through the system, they've been a barrier to come out, and this idea of how do you manage risk and how do you understand risk. It's a particular group within that which has kind of really evolved for ourselves, and that's this group of individuals, and we've put the word arson on, we didn't use fire setting, but arson is often used in a kind of emotional way to describe these individuals. But they're individuals who have themselves had a significant mental health history, and at some point in there, maybe been involved in multiple fire settings across the business. We're seeing a large proportion of those individuals now being referred to the business, and we've been quite successful with them. And the trick for us is, well, actually, how do we manage those people? It's something we can't do ourselves, and there are many different partners involved in the chain of how we manage somebody with fire setting. And it's, I suspect, partners that you don't ordinarily think about. So it's one thing for us as a care provider saying we can support somebody who has an extensive history of fire setting. We then need a landlord who trusts us as an organisation that we can support that person so they feel safe to do so. We need commissioners, we need partners who want to work with us and understand the risks we're taking on and provide us with the evidence, the information, the assessment that we need to form our decision. And then we have to take that and we go to the insurance company. We go to the insurance company of the landlord, and we demonstrate to the insurance company how it is, how all these partners come together to manage and support that individual. So again, this concept of partnership and managing risk is just fundamental to manage complex people and moving from hospital environments on into the community. There are, I think it's unique. Richard will say it's not unique. There are different models out there. We didn't set off with a blueprint for our business, and I don't think the blueprint exists. We kind of set off on a bit of an adventure. We realised we wanted to make things happen and make it happen differently. And this concept of quality and practice team has evolved as we've gone along. The quality and practice team essentially is made up of mental health professionals, social workers, some of them are AMPs in the past, RMNs, occupational therapists, people coming with a psychological background in the team as well. And I heard the question was raised in one of this morning's session, and it was a psychologist who was raising the question about what support is offered to people who support people with complex mental health needs. And I said, at the beginning, my background was running children's services, and the thing I realised very early on in running children's services is that when placements break down, in the majority of cases, they don't break down because of the behaviour of the individual. They break down due to the anxiety of the staff in managing those behaviours. So the sort of founding principle of our quality and practice team was they should be there to enable the staff to understand and to make sense and rationalise the behaviours that they're having to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So that team has evolved, and there are a number of different elements to that team which help us as a business present ourselves both internally as being competent, because we've got our own stakeholders we need to demonstrate why we can take these high-risk individuals, but also to our partners to feel confident that we're an organisation who should and could refer to. So the first part of that is our quality and practice team oversee all assessments coming into the business. And it's interesting, it's often an area of some tension when we're working with colleagues in the NHS, and that's who's the expert. And it isn't about who's the expert. For us, it's about who's accountable and us owning decisions. So we have a highly skilled team of individuals who go out and conduct our assessments because they're doing on our behalf. And we do that in quite a forensic way, where we go back over the history. If we want to go back over the placement history, we want to go back over what's worked as well as what hasn't worked, so we can try and build towards the future. So that's the first part to do. So we've got a strong point of individuals coming into the business where we've engaged with other clinicians and we're building up confidence about how we can move people through the system. The second part is how we then build up that confidence of a workforce. And that's delivered through an ongoing training programme, and that's delivered in a number of different ways. We have what we refer to as hub events, where our quality and practice team will surround a number of services. They'll identify the stress points, the challenges, maybe the types of behaviours that the services are dealing with, and then they'll provide focused training for those staff teams around those particular issues. They also, in speaking to the point before about supporting them, provide what I think is very valuable is reflective practice. And we do that on an ongoing basis, but we also do it post-incident, post-event, or when we are having critical situations in the business. So our staff have the opportunity to be professionally led through learning and development as things happen within the business. And then the last part, and I've said it a few times already, it provides a conduit for us to actually engage with professionals. And from experience and truth, whether it's right or wrong, that actually professionals engage much better with other professionals. And that helps us build that rapport and build that understanding. There are obvious challenges in that, and I'll not dwell too long on this. I've run out of time a bit. But frameworks, we find frameworks a particular challenge to work in. We find frameworks restrict the opportunity for us to come to work with people in a proper, true partnership way. The framework in itself kind of defines what it is everybody does, and it prevents us from developing an expertise. And I'll talk a little bit more about it just before we pass over to Northampton. But essentially, if we are to work with people with complex needs, then we need to enable our services to have people with complex needs, because you won't develop the skill and the learning to work, and we can't help the team grow unless we have those individuals in the service. Frameworks tend to control that and manage it and make it difficult for us as an organisation to grow and develop. But when it works, it's really effective, and that's why we're here today to talk about why it works and what makes a difference. Okay, so I think there's some fundamental things about how we've structured a business which make it work, but at the very beginning was an understanding that we had to have partners, we had to share risk. Linda is going to talk about what that looks like in real life, but just an example, there's a couple of examples in my mind. So we have a service which we opened jointly in Northampton, and we have a young woman there who had been in hospital. I don't know the whole history in the background, but she'd been in hospital for some considerable time, self-harming, ligaturing, lots of high-risk behaviour. I had the phone call. We have a particular way of managing risk as an organisation, and I had the phone call to say within the space of 2 weeks this individual had ligatured 5 times, and what she was doing was she was using her telephone to send text messages in terms of come rescue me. And unfortunately that was the very thing which was perpetuating the risk, the fact that she knew she could text and people would actually come and she would be rescued. And that becomes a critical moment for us as a business. We can't carry on with somebody ligaturing at that extent, and that's going to be a real risk for both them and for all those concerned. But when we discussed that within our own team, we were of the view that actually the solution to this was to take away the things she was using to rescue, and therefore enable her to engage in different dialogue about what was going on for herself, rather than drawing people into the sort of the ligaturing behaviour. Now that's quite a high risk, and it's quite a kind of a risky approach for an organisation to say, so look, we'll take our phone away if you can't text us anymore. We built a plan, we built a proposal, we took it to our partners, and that's the thing about being partners again. We need to have confidence that they understand who we are and they will make sense of that and share that risk with us. Collectively, we agreed a programme for doing that, where we would remove our phone, we would have daily phone calls, updates, reviews, what's going on for the individual, and it was successful. And we went from 5 incidents in a fortnight to it stopped immediately because she didn't have the means to actually contact the staff in the way she'd been using it to sort of further the behaviour. That gives a window of opportunity where that individual was then, there was a dog, a rescue dog that came into her life and gives a window of opportunity to work with the individual. And again, that couldn't have happened without this concept of partnership. And just to reiterate the point before with the fire setting, we had to work with our providers in NHS to provide evidence to us so we can collect this evidence together, take it further down our partnership line and build confidence with the insurers, with the housing providers to want to take people who have fire setting behaviours. Just kind of last point before we move on to Salem Lane. There's nothing new about what we have to say. It's been said for the past 30 years. What's different is how do we actually, when it's time to do something about it, really bring it to life and make it happen. We believe we have a model which does that, but more than anything, we believe we have a philosophy which says we can't do it ourselves. We need to find ways to work. And Richard made the point earlier on that we're often referred to as other. There's a lot to be got out of the private sector. There's a lot to be got out of partnerships because there's a lot more to come to the table. Salem Lane. So our life in Northampton started with a single service, and we were on the framework. And that service, from our perspective, wasn't working. Commercially, it wasn't viable. And when I say commercially not viable, I don't just mean that actually it didn't produce and it was losing money. Actually, it wasn't furthering our ambition as a business. It wasn't meeting our vision, mission, which Richard shared with you earlier on. And therefore, we didn't see a benefit in that service. And what it did was it took a conversation to Northampton, which said, look, we don't want to keep doing this. We're not doing the thing we set out to do. Either we want to scale down and move away, or we want to have a conversation about scaling up and doing something different. And that was an interesting conversation, but actually that was a conversation which was grabbed by both hands and said, okay, let's sit down and let's look differently about what our problems are and where your vision and your aspirations for the future could help us as an organisation. And that's how we came up with SIL and Lane. We were able to bring property to the market. We were able to bring our business nows to the market and our experience of working across a large number of authorities where partnerships had worked, right, and then form a steering group which sat around the business and has made a real difference. And there's a short video here, I think. Is it? Hopefully. This is Louise, who is... Can you hear that?
Crank up the volume.
Just been in and out all the time. And then got me to St Andrews, was there for a few years, and then came here. I did have a flat before and I lived on my own, and I really, really struggled. I was just in and out of hospital when I was living there. So I wasn't managing at all. And then obviously went to St Andrews, and since I've come out, it's actually nice to come home, and I call it home, I don't call it the flat. And yeah, it's good having my own space. I actually even like housework now, which is really strange. And I like going to the supermarket to get my food, which is sad, I know. And yeah, it's just nice to have my own space. I think the staff here are a lot different from the staff support I've had in the past. A lot of places I've been haven't had 24-hour support, and I don't think it's been as, I want to say intense, but as sort of as there as much as it is here. And I think I've got a better relationship with staff here that I have anywhere else that I've been. Basically, just before I was at St Andrews, it got to the point where I was just sick of the situation of just going in and out, and it was just, I hated it, and I couldn't really see how it was going to change. But sort of a lot's changed since then, and I'm sort of living in a way that I never thought I'd be able to. I guess in terms of my progress, as much as I feel uncomfortable saying it, I think I've come a long way. And my mum actually said to me the other day that she didn't have to worry about me all the time anymore because she knew I had the right support, which was nice. Don't like to think that I put my mum and dad through that, but that means a lot that my mum said that. And it's just nice that I'm able to live normality, really, which is actually something I've never done before. So I'm learning as I go.
Okay, I'd like to hand you over to Linda now. Just for it to Louise, one of the things that really stuck out to me when I was watching Louise's video was this idea about right support. And right support for her was knowing that the support was always there. How often she used that support, I couldn't tell you, but I know it wasn't, and I think she makes a point, anywhere near as intense as when the support wasn't always there, but it was in focused particular hours for it.
Thank you. So I'm the other partner in this relationship, which is the NHS. You can probably see that I've got the longest job title in history, but it actually is the most simplistic job in the world. This is just our background story, really, as to how we arrived to working with SIL in partnership. So back in 2016, I'm sure like lots of other areas, the CCG held the budget for locked and open rehabilitation. The budget was blown, outcomes weren't great. You would see people go into kind of long-term placements, come back out into the community. Very quickly that would break down, they would end up being readmitted, and the cycle would go round and round and round. So back in 2016, we knew that we had to do something differently. Our service users also told us that we had to do something differently as well. So we went to see everybody that was in locked and open rehabilitation and kind of did a survey on them and followed up the people that had been in those placements, and they were all basically telling us the same thing, that we're all individuals, we may have similar diagnoses, but we needed to be treated as individuals and listened to, and not be contained in environments that are a false situation, not the real world. So that was back in 2016 where things were a bit grim. So what did we do? We had a conversation with our local CCG and said, you know, cost budget is rising, these people are going round and round in the circle, we want to do something differently, and we've talked to all our service users. We feel we need to work with them on an individual basis. So within that, the CCG very trustingly handed over that budget to us as an NHS trust, and we developed what we called the recovery team. Again, this is nothing, it's not rocket science, it's done, tried and tested everywhere else. But what we wanted to do was set up an intensive team of clinicians, predominantly support workers, to work with people that were either in locked and open rehabilitation and support the transition back out into the community, or to avert people being admitted to such places. We couldn't have done this alone though. We didn't have the budget to do this on a 24/7 basis. We didn't have accommodation, etc. So we did have to work in partnership. We already had people in placements, in supported accommodation in the community, but it was very much a them and us, and it very much felt like a business. It wasn't partnership working. So we got together with SIL, and I just want to show you what's happened between 2016 and 2019 to our budget. I don't know how clearly you can see this, but when we inherited the budget, the blue line is people that were in locked and open rehabilitation and the spend. Now we know that we will never prevent people from going into such settings. There will always be times, for various reasons, that people do need to go into those settings. But the green line is our new spend. So since we've changed the way that we work, our spend is minimal. And the red line is the placements into locked and open rehabilitation that we have avoided by working in partnership with SIL. So our current situation as it stands is that we have got 8 females in locked rehabilitation now, and the numbers speak for themselves. 13 males in locked rehab, 8 females in open rehab, and 23 males in open rehab. And you'll see that there's 2 kind of distinguished groups of people. Predominantly in locked rehab, it's your female, younger generation with a diagnosis of emotionally unstable personality disorder. And then we have a group of males, predominantly with psychotic illnesses relating to drugs and alcohol. What we've done is we've worked with each individual to identify what are their values, and alongside SIL, supported each other completely in partnership to work towards that individual's values. So the benefits of partnership working from an NHS perspective are that as 2 teams, we come together as one to share the risk, to take the risk together. our team is an extension of SIL's team and vice versa. What we also have is the ability to share experiences as to businesses or to companies, from recruitment to what's available in the community, various resources. The ultimate benefits sit with the service users. You've heard from Louise, who said it feels like home. That lady has had probably about 40 hospital admissions into acute inpatients and probably about 10 failed community placements. This is the only time she said it feels like home, and that's the best feedback you can get from anybody. We share risks, so as highlighted by Martin, some of these individuals have created some very risky situations for themselves, but by working together, being open and sharing that risk, we have a no-blame culture. And an example of that is that we currently have a lady living at Salem Lane who actually set fire to herself on a couple of occasions. There's no supported accommodation provider in the land that's going to take that risk lightly. There's many that would actually end somebody's tenancy or placement, but there's certainly no housing association that's going to take or tolerate that lightly either. But what we've done by evidencing SIL support, what we offer as an NHS provider support, and to the housing association and your insurance companies, is that by all working together, that lady can continue to live there. So I can't emphasise the risk sharing and the risk management benefits from working in partnership. And I suppose it's not all plain sailing, because we're working with individuals. So the lessons that we've learned is that we absolutely have to accept and recognise our achievements, because both the NHS and SIL have achieved huge things for these individuals. But it's the service users' feedback. We've had a lady that spent her first Christmas in 9 years out in the community at SIL. She has always been in hospital throughout Christmas. So I think, just moving on. Oh, is that you, Richard? Sorry, I'm all over the place. Thank you.
I think we're doing quite well time-wise. I mean, so Linda's outlined kind of her benefits of working in partnership with us, and what was interesting is we kind of did a straw poll internally, and it's much the same really. I mean, Martin, I think our reflections are very similar really. I mean, Martin's already mentioned the ability to be able to work in the way that we want to work and try and deliver the support in the way we want to, rather than being hemmed in by a framework. What's been great though is, reflecting with the team and the manager and so on, the balance of power is equal. We're working as equals basically, rather than as Martin pointed out, sometimes people who know better necessarily, where we're suggesting something might be done in a particular way. Transparency, decisiveness, the ability to come to decisions and stick with those decisions, which are such as taking the phone away and so on, but working together. So decisive in our risk management plans. Honest, I think with Mark, I can read it. Here, I wrote it down here. Honesty about challenges and so on. Recruitment's a beast, and to be able to sort of say we're struggling with the recruitment and we're managing it as best we can, and that not to be seen as an organisational failure is actually rather refreshing, really, rather than sort of being summoned into a meeting and why what's happening with your staffing and so on. Supportive, yep, and clarity. I mean, we sat down and there was a steering group, and it was very clear about the roles and the responsibilities and what we were going to do together. So that steering group involved the county council, obviously the health trust, and the CCG, and that also involved sign-up. Everyone signed up to this project, and ultimately success. Yeah, I mean, we've had a lot of successes. I mean, Louise's is a rather lovely story. The lady who's been out in terms of Christmas, that's got to be a good story in anyone's books. And so, yeah, I think the lesson really for us here is this is what can be achieved in partnership, and and one would hope that we could reproduce this elsewhere throughout the country. Hang on, what am I doing here? It's not moving. Oh yeah, here we are. A couple of things I poached off the King's Fund recently. Just current ways of measuring performance and holding the healthcare system account do not adequately reflect people's experiences. I think this is what Linda was alluding to. Strong case for strengthening connections between the NHS and other services to create population health systems and so on. We welcome this. Require collaboration between NHS organisations, local authorities, the third sector, and other local partners. Who are those other local partners? Okay, it's us. Looking forward, the forward view, joined up services and so on. Obviously, we look to the ICSs and so on and hope that we can see, and we are seeing some changes in the way people are looking to commission services. At this point, I kind of want to finish with Kay again, basically, and this is a bit more of the hard sell, basically. So the message at this point really is go away is SIL, we're great, okay? So, we get the last bit of video. There we are.
Yeah, I've learned a lot since I've been in SILs. And again, the staff there were brilliant. They never rushed me. They never, they were always there. I'm really happy I did that rather than going from St Andrews straight home, because I wouldn't be the person I am today, really. Yeah. Is that all right?
So what you don't see is me waving tenors in the background at that point, really, as well. But yeah. So anyway, thank you very much indeed for listening to us. I don't know if we've got time for any questions. If you've got any questions, apologies for the awful jokes and the terrible analogies and so on. It's I just can't resist it when I reach my age. Are we? We are indeed. So if there are any questions, please ask someone else. Lovely. Thank you.